On June 13, 2025, a date that would forever be etched in the annals of history, Tel Aviv's vibrant nightlife, usually pulsating with energy and laughter, was abruptly shattered, the joyous atmosphere replaced with an eerie silence. It was shattered by the blare of emergency sirens, their piercing wails cutting through the night. These sirens served as a chilling signal of imminent attack, a stark warning that the skies above were no longer safe. The city's residents, caught completely off guard in the midst of their evening routines, scrambled frantically for safety, their initial shock quickly turning into a desperate race against time. They were abandoning cars, leaving them stranded in the streets, and rushing headlong into bomb shelters, seeking refuge in the cold, concrete bunkers. Simultaneously, red alerts flashed ominously on their phones, confirming their worst fears. Above, interceptor missiles, streaks of light against the dark canvas of the night sky, were launched, colliding violently with incoming threats in a fiery display of technological warfare. It was a deadly aerial ballet, a macabre dance of destruction played out high above the city. Explosions rocked the city with earth-shattering force, each blast sending tremors through the ground. This was the unmistakable signal that Iran's long-promised retaliation, a threat that had loomed for months, had finally arrived with devastating force. Israel's Iron Dome and David's Sling, the nation's cutting-edge missile defense systems, worked furiously, attempting to intercept the sheer volume of missiles raining down upon the city. But the relentless barrage overwhelmed even these advanced defenses, pushing them to their absolute limit. The night sky was now a chaotic spectacle of flashing lights and falling debris, a grim reminder of the destructive power unleashed. Below, people huddled together in crowded shelters, seeking solace and safety in the face of unimaginable terror. They were listening anxiously to the deafening chaos unfolding outside, each explosion amplifying their fear and uncertainty. This was not just a military strike aimed at strategic targets, it was a calculated act of psychological warfare, designed to sow fear and panic among the civilian population. It was shaking the nation's sense of security to its very core, leaving Israelis questioning their future. Sirens echoed relentlessly across Israeli cities, a constant jarring reminder of the danger that lurked. They were spreading fear and uncertainty like a wildfire, consuming the nation in a wave of anxiety. From the bustling metropolis of Tel Aviv to the ancient city of Jerusalem and beyond, no corner of Israel was spared. As the first wave of missiles struck with devastating impact, the true scale and magnitude of the crisis began to dawn on the world. The region was teetering precariously on the brink of a wider, more devastating war, a conflict that threatened to engulf the entire Middle East. The night was only just beginning, promising more destruction and uncertainty. It was setting the stage for a prolonged and escalating conflict, a conflict that would inevitably draw in global powers, forever altering the geopolitical landscape. Iran's Operation True Promise 3 was not just a military exercise, it was a carefully orchestrated display of power, intended to send a clear message across the region and beyond. It was a calculated, massive assault, meticulously planned to maximize impact and demonstrate Iran's capabilities. This operation was executed in direct response to Israeli strikes on what Iran considered critical assets, including its nuclear and military sites. The strikes were a red line, triggering a response that aimed to re-establish deterrence. Over 150 ballistic missiles formed the core of this offensive. Complementing the missile barrage were 100 advanced drones, adding another layer of complexity to the attack. These missiles and drones were launched in coordinated waves, a strategic move designed to saturate and overwhelm enemy defenses. The primary objective was clear: to overwhelm Israel's air defenses through sheer numbers and sophisticated technology. The attack targeted military bases, aiming to cripple Israel's operational capabilities. It also focused on intelligence centers, seeking to disrupt the flow of information and strategic decision-making. However, the execution was not flawless. Many projectiles veered off course, missing their intended targets. Tragically, this imprecision led to missiles hitting civilian neighborhoods, far from any military objective. This deviation escalated the human toll, bringing the harsh realities of war to innocent civilians. Adding to the complexity, Iran's proxies joined in, most notably, the Houthis, who fired a missile toward Jerusalem, extending the battlefield. That particular projectile ultimately landed in Hebron, underscoring the indiscriminate nature of such attacks. This highlighted the regional scope of the conflict, demonstrating how quickly localized tensions can escalate into broader confrontations. The operation's lack of precision raised serious questions about the targeting and execution. It turned cities into battlegrounds, transforming urban landscapes into zones of conflict and fear. This intensified the terror for ordinary people, forcing families to seek shelter and live in constant fear. Despite the scale of the attack, Israel's defenses intercepted many threats, showcasing the effectiveness of its air defense systems. However, the sheer volume of projectiles exposed vulnerabilities, revealing the limits of even the most advanced defense systems. The involvement of regional proxies expanded the conflict, turning it into a multifaceted crisis with far-reaching implications. This complicated Israel's response, forcing it to consider a wider range of threats and actors. The situation drew in international concern, prompting urgent calls for de-escalation and diplomatic solutions. What began as a targeted retaliation quickly spiraled into something far more dangerous. It quickly spiraled into a volatile multi-front crisis, threatening to destabilize the entire region and beyond. The aftermath was chaos: collapsed buildings, dust-filled air, and desperate rescue efforts. In Tel Aviv, first responders pulled survivors from rubble, their bravery a stark contrast to the devastation. Across Israel, hospitals were overwhelmed. 28 killed, over 1,400 injured, both civilians and soldiers. The Houthi missile in Hebron injured 5 Palestinians, showing the conflict's indiscriminate reach. Israeli airstrikes on Iran were even deadlier: 627 killed, nearly 5,000 wounded, including military leaders and civilians. The psychological scars ran deep on both sides, with trauma and grief fueling anger and exhaustion. The war's true cost was paid by ordinary people caught in a conflict they never chose. As missiles rained down, the world took notice. The US backed Israel diplomatically and launched targeted airstrikes on Iran's nuclear sites, aiming to cripple its program without triggering all-out war. France joined in, intercepting Iranian drones with missile systems and fighter jets, signaling international solidarity with Israel. Behind the scenes, intense diplomacy unfolded. President Trump, after authorizing strikes, pivoted to de-escalation, using the damage to Iran's nuclear facilities as leverage for negotiations. After 12 days, a ceasefire was announced, halting the violence and opening the door to direct US-Iran nuclear talks. The international response blended force with negotiation, pulling both sides back from the brink. The ceasefire was fragile, but it marked a turning point. The world watched, hoping diplomacy would hold where force had failed. With the guns finally silent, after weeks of relentless conflict, the true scale of destruction began to emerge, painting a grim picture of the war's impact. The extent of the devastation became chillingly clear. Iran's losses were catastrophic, a severe blow to its infrastructure and military capabilities. Over 120 buildings lay in ruins in Tehran alone, reduced to rubble and twisted metal. The capital city bore the brunt of the attacks. Key nuclear sites were crippled, setting back Iran's nuclear program significantly, and its air defenses were severely degraded, leaving the nation vulnerable. Israeli and US strikes successfully eliminated top Iranian commanders and scientists, dealing a critical blow to Iran's leadership. This created a significant leadership vacuum, disrupting command structures and decision-making processes. Iran's missile and drone stockpiles were significantly depleted, hindering its ability to project power. Consequently, its ability to retaliate effectively was severely hampered, limiting its options in the aftermath. In Israel, the damage was less strategic in nature, but it was deeply personal and emotionally scarring for the population. The toll was heavy: 28 lives lost and 1,400 people injured, many with life-altering wounds. Entire neighborhoods were scarred by missile strikes, leaving lasting physical and emotional wounds on the communities. While Israel's air defenses successfully intercepted the majority of incoming threats, some inevitably got through, exposing vulnerabilities in the system and highlighting areas for improvement. Both governments, seeking to maintain morale and project strength, claimed victory in the conflict. However, the stark reality on the ground was one of immense loss, widespread grief, and deep-seated trauma for both nations. Iran now faced a monumental and daunting task of rebuilding its shattered infrastructure and economy. Meanwhile, Israel grappled with the long-term psychological impact on its citizens, and the urgent need to address exposed weaknesses in its defense systems. The war had left both nations deeply scarred, both physically and emotionally, with wounds that would take years to heal. Ultimately, the true cost of the conflict was measured not in strategic gains or losses, but in the countless lives lost and the shattered communities left behind. The ceasefire brought relief, but it was built on shaky ground. Brokered by intense US diplomacy, the truce halted the violence but left core issues unresolved. Iran, humiliated by its losses, suspended cooperation with nuclear inspectors, raising fears of renewed nuclear ambitions. Israel, though relieved, saw the ceasefire as a temporary pause, not a resolution. The conflict proved Iran could strike directly, and that even Israel's advanced defenses had limits. Both sides began rearming and reassessing, bracing for the next round. Upcoming US-Iran nuclear talks offered a glimmer of hope, but success was far from certain. Without real diplomatic breakthroughs, the ceasefire risked being just a brief interlude before another war. As the dust settled, uncertainty gripped the region. The war had set a dangerous precedent: direct state-on-state conflict, shattered cities, and unresolved grievances. In Iran, hardliners pushed for nuclear weapons, while the government cracked down on dissent, deepening instability. In Israel, the attack reinforced a sense of isolation and the need for military self-reliance, fueling debates over preemptive action. The future hinged on fragile diplomacy, US-Iran nuclear talks, international inspections, and the willingness of leaders to compromise. For now, a tense quiet prevailed, but the gears of conflict continued to turn beneath the surface. The shadow of war lingered, a stark reminder of how quickly peace can unravel. The region remained on edge, waiting to see if this fragile pause would hold, or if another storm was on the horizon.